It doesn't matter if you are in Saudi Arabia or if you are in China. There is always an interest from them. There is always something interesting that you can pick up.
This is Exploring Leaders, episode 27, with senior executive, advisor, and author Erik Nordling. Erik will share his story and his vast international leadership experiences, working in many countries and leading businesses all over the world, inspiring you to take responsible leadership in the digital age.
Do you wonder how trailblazing leaders sense at scale, evolve to innovate, and align the actions in this increasingly digital world? Welcome to the Exploring Leaders podcast. The experienced team at Degosian interviews leaders from around the world for insights and inspiration on how to lead in the digital age. In this episode, Degosian founder Liselette Engstam, who is also an independent board chair and director, researcher, author, and advisor, asks the questions.
Our guest today is Senior Executive Advisor and Author Erik Nordling. Erik has a background from executive leadership positions in major international IT and telecommunication companies originating from both US and Europe, with significant work experiences from US, Latin America, Western and Central Europe, and the Middle East, as well as the extensive time spent within Eastern Europe and Africa, and with business focus on different aspects of commercial management related to customers. Erik has authored a book that shares stories from working in many countries and many of the related learnings. Erik is passionate about the dynamics of multicultural workforces, the importance of having the right people, what to do if you don't, the embedment of sustainability in operations. This episode focuses on his journey and insights he found useful when collaborating with many of the top companies, leaders, and boards. So warm welcome, Erik Nordling. You have a long executive leadership career and you worked mainly in the IT and telecom businesses, and you worked for European companies, you worked for American companies, but you also worked all across the world and you lived on many places. And the other area that I find interesting is that you have focused so much on the commercial leadership side. So I thought we would start with, if you can just let us know what has taken you to where you are today.
Oh, it's a long story, so let's not spend too much, but it really started in the early days after high school, when I got a grant to go to the United States of America for 1 year of study at one of the universities over there. Not one of the most fancy ones, but still. It's planted a seed in myself. This is something I want to do more of. And the Swedish environment all of a sudden seemed too small. So it was an obvious thing to do when I got my graduation, to accept actually an offer from one company to start as a trainee with a focus of going abroad and working abroad. So that was my first professional step, so to speak. And ever since, I've been on that road. And that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
1976.
And it brought you to so many things. So one of the things we will discuss in this podcast episode is also some insights from a book that you have just released and that you have written that is actually taking up some of these really interesting questions. And it's a book with a lot of interesting short stories, so it's quite easily read. And can you share some of the insights that people will get by reading this book?
Oh, it's what shall we call it? It's a menu of different things. I started to have a look at how many times have I been traveling abroad. And I made an estimate. Obviously, I don't have a specific chart showing where I've been and all that, but it turned out to be approximately 500 international trips. Having worked in sales, having worked in other things. So I started to write it down. for fun, and mainly because I wanted to share with my 5 grandchildren who was grandpa, and also for some others who might be interested. They turn up as you write a book. It wasn't a book to start with. When you write down things, this whole head starts to work again.
Yeah.
And it picks up other things that you had really forgotten. And it turned out that there was about 50 that could possibly serve the purpose. A broad palette of activities ranging from death-threatening situations I've been in to actually missing meeting in Australia by 24 hours. And we also added a few of the more spectacular things that you get as expat, when you can actually move out, use your time abroad to see new things. And I had to stop there because it just became too much. Maybe there will be a sequel.
But it's fantastic. And I think it's obviously value and fortunate for you that you have been able to do that. But people can pick up things just from 1 or 2 stories and become interested in just visiting those places, either privately or in work. So it's like a little inspiration book as well.
Could be, I think. One of the things that you learn is that when you think you know about the country, when you have lived there for a few years, you realize how little, and it doesn't matter what country it is. I've been to the US, you grow up looking at Fred Flintstone and whatnot, and you think what the US is all about. And then you live there and you realize that it is that and so much more.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So what surprised you most in working in all of these international leadership positions?
Well, surprising, perhaps not, but there has always been an opportunity to meet people who you can relate to, and you can talk to and learn from and educate to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you are in Saudi Arabia or if you are in China. There is always an interest from them. There is always something interesting that you can pick up.
Right.
It may be very different. The culture, you cannot and must not meet with somebody from a certain Middle East country and start talking business immediately. It takes an hour of tea drinking before you can get going. Whereas if you start drinking tea in China, perhaps you can do that, but they usually don't have the time to spend. So it's very different. It's very local. There are some things that are common, and that is what you have to use when you do, for example, change management.
Yeah.
Some things must be the same.
Yeah. And what are some of those things? Because you have worked a lot with actually transforming and trying to harmonize some of the work processes across the world. What are some of the things that you believe that?
There are a number of things. One of the things is that you have to value and understand your situation. Change, as you know, is very simple. You have to understand where you are, where you're going, and how to get there.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. But how do you understand where you are if you don't talk to people, if you don't read, if you don't find what we call in the intelligence service 2 or more bearings that point in the same direction? So, for example, every large company has its directives and its do's and don'ts. Sometimes they're extensive and sometimes they're very focused. My view on this is if you can focus on a few things, such what we used to call the non-negotiable core, and then allow people out there to elaborate around these core items, then you're much more likely to have a successful activity. And things that you have to look at are obviously economics.
Yeah.
Profit, cash flow, all these wonderful things that you never learn in my education, I had to find myself. But also the value of people. If you go, for example, if you want to know what things are really like, go talk to people. Don't talk only to the executives. Go down to the people who actually do what you intend to change or outsource or whatever you want to do. They usually know pretty much what is wrong, what should be done. They may not have the same opinion, but if you put all that together into a package, you're in good shape. Finding out where you are is, in my experience, one of the most difficult things to do. Whereas sketching where you want to be it's expensive because you bring in a lot of fancy consultants like myself, you, and then you pay the bill and you have a wonderful target.
Yeah.
But the question is, have you taken into consideration what it means to move from where you are?
Yeah.
That sometimes you don't know where you want to be. So economics is one thing. The people, the human resources, do you have the people to do this? Do you have an executive team to do this? Do you have the experts to do this?
Yeah.
Changing, we both moved from product to system sales. And I've done that twice. And it is not easy to change that. You need a totally different set of people to complement what you already have.
Yeah.
Some can be educated into something else. Some cannot and must not. Yeah? So the people, the economics, and also, let's not forget the customers. Who are you dealing with?
Yeah.
Now, one of my favorite stories, if there is time for it.
Absolutely.
My dear friend who was starting as a commercial manager towards one of the large firms in the Middle East. So he was British. He was sitting there elaborating, this is what I think we should do, and this is how I view the situation. He had made his homework, and the customer was patiently waiting for him to end. And then he said, I listened to you very carefully. I agree that you have a good situation under control. I think you might have some interesting points there. And I know that you do as I tell you, or else you go to jail. Oops. Full stop in the discussion. Here was somebody who wanted to make a point.
Yeah. A really harsh point.
A really harsh point. Now, the thing was that it was in the telecom business, of course, where you, in essence, have only 200 large customers.
Right.
So you have to be very attentive to what does the customer say, and try to work that into something that works with your views on things like technology, pricing, culture, all these wonderful things. And then you put all that together, and then you're ready.
You can check out more hints and tips in the blog post covering this podcast episode of Exploring Leaders at the Degoshen blog, which you can find at degoshen.com.
I love your stories, as you know. And one of the things I wanted to ask you that I think that people have very strong views about, but maybe don't really come close to, and that is that the laws are actually quite different in different countries, and the corporate law or the company has attained their view of a law in the country. How do you handle that, the must in that, and how do you work with your customers on that? Can you share a bit with your experience on that?
For sure. First of all, you think that it's all the same in the Western world. It's not, obviously. You have the Anglo-Saxon version of what is done and what can be done, and you have other versions. But of course, if you enter into other parts of the world where Sharia laws and all traditions weigh heavily, you just have to have local expertise. I would not dare. We had a great example where we were looking at refreshing our agreements with the customer because they just didn't work. It didn't make sense. So we had a local consultant evaluate. Actually, we had two to make sure that we were doing the right thing. What is the risk if we embark into this particular change? One of them came back saying that, oh, your risk can be sized at about $1 billion. Oops, we said, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And then there was another one who said, nah, you don't have to worry. This is not a big problem. So you never know in some parts of the world what might be and might not be a risk. For example. So you need to have a trusted advisor. And I think it also for us who are coming from Sweden with quite a firm legal structure and where everything that is not prohibited is okay, more or less.
Yeah.
And you move into the UK or the US, where things are not as simple. You have the common law.
Yeah.
You have the common law, and it is interpreted a zillion times in different courts. And those decisions are still valid. So it's, to me, it has been a wake-up call. I was, as I started in sales, and there everything was simple.
Yeah.
Out there, get the agreement and off you go. Moving into commercial management was like opening a new door to see how difficult it could be, how you must understand what you're doing, prepare carefully, be ready to negotiate. Nothing is firm, nothing is given. You just have to give and take and make sure that you don't do something stupid.
Yeah.
Which is very easy. I've done it.
Yeah. So that's another way to learn, right? To actually be allowed to do mistakes.
Oh my.
And of course, as much as you can, bring in people who have been there before you and at least listen to them. You have worked as a commercial and sales leader and executive in a lot of parts of the world. What do you think is one of the myths about the type of job you have done that isn't true?
It is. It all boils down to change, doesn't it? If you want to move into actual change management, you need people who understand the local situation, are also understanding the company desires. Where do we want to go? And why do we want to go there? The myth, I think, is that you can hammer in a certain one-size-fits-all in 140 countries. I know, I've tried it. Didn't work.
Yeah.
Many things can be and must be taken into consideration. The other thing that you have to do is to carefully explain where you want to go. Say that here we are, this is the picture we are looking at. This little corner down here is the price you have to pay.
Yeah.
In here, you have no independence whatsoever. Be it the reporting, the pricing, be it this, powers reserved, as we used to say in the old days. You are more than free to actually elaborate yourselves. However, let's stay in touch. Let's make sure that we know what we're doing so that we can share between the different countries. Many countries claim to be very, and perhaps you read the story about my visit to a big country in the West.
Yeah.
Where they said that this is something that you have invented at head office. So I said, okay, we are very different. In what way are you different? But wrote it down on the whiteboard. And then we said, you know what? All these things I've seen in more than 75% of the countries that I've been. You may not be all that unique. And and you may not be all that advantageous trying to be so unique. The power of joining forces, in particular when you approach global customers, is very important. So the myth, I think, that I'm coming to is that one size does not fit all. But part of the one size fits all must be common, and the rest can be shared between different people. And when they've done something really dumb in one part of the world, it is educational for people who have not yet started. As is if you've done something really well. And you can take that and put your little spice and flavor on it and make it yours. Funny story, we did an enormous attack on capital employed, as everybody knows is important. It is boring as well, in particular for sales. And if you don't write your agreements in the proper way and execute them in the proper way, you are frito, as you say in some countries. Now, how do you approach a modern company with such a boring subject? We actually sent a physical letter with a brochure. So that was new. People had not received anything but emails. Then they started, well, what on earth is this? Who is doing this? So whether you are in one or other country, you may be successful in different ways, but the core has to remain the same. Give you another example, sales management. Sales management, isn't that fun? To be a sales manager and to be able to ask your salespeople to, on a regular basis, tell me the truth, or what does your outlook look like? What does your next year contain in terms of opportunities? What is the risk and how big a chance is it that you win? And who wants to do that?
No, at least no salespeople.
No. How do you approach people? Well, there you have a pretty firm, non-negotiable core. Because the value to people managing the business is enormous.
It is.
On the other hand, I know that Mr. and so, he always, or she always, puts a lid on it. Then there are others who are hopelessly enthusiastic. So you need to understand, where does this come from? Apply some intelligence, or at least some experience, and then you end up with a decent picture of what might be the future. Then, of course, war starts and pandemics turn up, but at least you have a base from which to operate.
I think it's super interesting how on that topic, you just ask, how many do you need to have of the opportunities early in the pipeline to actually get to where you need to get to? And most people have no idea, right? It's super guesswork. And I think if you turn it around, there's two things that's really important for salespeople, and that is to actually know that. How many things do I need to dig up to actually get to the end, right? But the other thing that if I look back on all of my career, which also has been a lot in sales, when the good people have coached me, they have also volunteered to help. And if they don't know anything about the deals or the customers, etc., it's really hard for them to actually volunteer to be part of supporting that. And of course, you don't want to have 500 people coming in, but at least some really good ones that can also have more intelligent ears towards the customer.
It's that in all kinds of leadership, isn't it? I have always been self-contained in a way that I don't want anybody to support me unless I need it. And then there are others who value constant participation
Yeah.
of executives or mentors or whoever, formal or informal leaders.
Yeah.
And it's so different. And so I think anybody who says that a leader is a leader with a big L and he looks like or she looks like this is wrong.
Yeah.
We had one of the guys that I had working for me, he was being silent with the customers all the time. And they were silent as well, looking at the sunset, having a beer. He made more business than anybody else.
Yeah.
So you never know.
No, you never know. I think that is a
but
very interesting conclusion.
But a leader can be so many things. There are so many kinds of leadership. For example, you and I have both been part of the big, should we say, the big disasters at big companies. Or 40% of the staff have been laid off. And
right.
It is not the time for vast discussions. It is go do.
Yeah.
However, and I learned from one of my mentors this thing, that taking the time, if you have it, to talk to people, to listen to people, and to form something that people can understand and accept, reluctantly or not, but still accept, then implementation is so much quicker and so much more success. Right. Now, if you don't have the time, then that is a luxury that you cannot count on. No,
but you can start do it as soon as you're out of the hoods.
Oh my. Yeah. And also, if you see where the train is moving, you can start early.
To get even more value out of the podcast series Exploring Leaders, you can find everything from research reports to advice and courses at the Degoshen website, which you can find at degoshen.com.
I wanted to ask you a bit, I know you've been very engaged also in sustainability. I wanted to ask you around what your engagement has been there and what you found important in that topic.
Sustainability is quite a wide thing. It is, if you look at the goals of the sustainability community, there are plenty. Far too many to actually be operational. I actually say that I can handle 3 goals or possibly 4. Nevertheless, sustainability is important. It is vital, perhaps not to an old timer like me, but to my kids and to my grandchildren. This is something that we have to do. And it is, in my view, the biggest change program ever launched. Now, if I look at what happens with these huge things, they are taken by people who want to make a big mystery out of it, want to make it big, who want to make it very complicated. And it is big and complicated, but usually the way it has been approached is either by fake it or by making a huge and enormous activity. You appoint sustainability vice president. You educate in every detail that you can possibly think of. And then you think you're done. If we back up, you remember the quality approach when we were talking quality all the time. You did exactly that. You appointed a quality executive. You had a totally new set of words. You have a system to follow up and all these wonderful things. And it didn't work because it had to be embedded into the day-to-day procedure of the company. It had to be there as part, we say, part of the DNA. But in reality, it's all about getting it into the processes, getting it into the day-to-day operations, and following up like anything else. I see that happening a lot. You appoint big bosses, big staff work, big systems, big this and big that. But are the people on board? Are they operational? If you are in procurement, for example, how do you change from fulfilling the specification and having the lowest price into something that is different. I'm part of this SPP movement where we are working together with large companies and small companies like myself, trying to figure out how to move about, trying to capture good ideas that have been launched by companies you haven't heard about doing big things in sustainability. They may not speak all that loudly, but they do. And they do continuously. And they do it all through their corporations. And I think this is the big, absolutely most important thing, to start with an area that you think you can control and expand from there. Have a target for sure. Target is easy, but start with something reasonably small. Important that you think may impact your own company and your partners.
And do you, to that point, is there any company or companies that you see that has started good on that journey in that sense?
Oh my, there are plenty. Bayer medicine company is doing very well. Surprisingly, British Petroleum is very much on the front line. You have a number of large corporations, but also small corporations, companies. Now, I don't have a good example there because I've been busy doing other things for a year, but they share that they have a good mastermind, understands both the subject and their own country. Is it that makes sense to us? Where can we make an impact? Let's start digging where we are standing and then wait with the huge to tell people later that this is what we have done, it's where we are going from here. So there is one I've heard a lot of. I'm trying to remember which. My mind is gone at times.
So no problem. Maybe we can add it to the notes if you can remind it to yourself later on. If we now go over and summarize this thing around that you're trying to run an international company and you're trying to make it a bit more sustainable because the world needs to be a bit more sustainable. What are some recommendations you would like to give to leaders and boards at this time?
Oh my, that is an interesting question. The thing is, I truly believe that there is a deal to be made in sustainability. Why do I say that? I have, like I said, 4 children. I have 5 grandchildren. I talk to them, I realize, and if they want to go to work with a company or an organization, it has to have a purpose that is bigger than making money, my view again. So if you want to have employees that work for you and that do a good job in the direction that you have chosen, then you need to be honest and truthful and actually do the things that you are talking about and be able to prove it. On the other hand, if you look at the procurement side from your customers, there's a big movement going on there as well. There will be a change in many, I'm not saying all, but many procurement organizations saying that in order for us to be sustainable and to be able to talk about it, we must make sure that the people who are delivering things to us are at least as sustainable in their
ambitions.
So if you want to have employees that are worth something, and if you want to have customers that you want to keep, and even get some new customers, this is the road to go. And what does that all compute to? Well, growth and profitability. So either you believe in it, I do, or you don't. And then I think you might find out that you're wrong.
Yeah, very good and very interesting. And it's also, as you say, it's a belief that the world can be better and that we can help as businesses help make it better. Now, people who are interested in reading your book, where can they find it? And could they possibly follow you somehow? And how could they do that? And if they're interested in getting in contact with you, how do they do that?
The book in itself, it is a very costly one, almost $4. You can find it on Amazon.com or on Amazon.de if you want to buy it in German marks. It's an ebook.
And remind people of the title again.
The Work Journey, and then 50 short stories from a long professional life. And my name is Erik Nordling. So that can be found there. So if you want to have a look at it, it's easy reading. It might give you something that you can use. If you want to follow me, I have done a number of things on LinkedIn. I am not running podcasts or anything like that. I've written a number of articles. I think LinkedIn is the best way to approach me, unless you want to talk to me directly, and then we make sure it's erik.nordling@nxpse.se. So let's keep it there. I think I will start again after a pause of 1 year in my senior advisor activities. As always, when you start something or restart something, you need to make it attractive. So I will come out in the coming weeks with a bit of interesting proposals, saying that give me a day.
Yeah.
I won't charge you that much. All I will charge you is my expenses. And then let's see if I make sense to you.
And I think it's so interesting. And so I have a lot of we work together, so I have a lot of good experiences from you. And in fact, I have brought you in when some of my companies have been in huge trouble. And it's been really hard from the board level to actually even understand where's the key problem here and why doesn't it become better? And you're fantastic in actually establishing trust with leaders to actually format into action plans, which is probably the most important thing that you can have also as a board.
I think the warning, though, is that I'm brutally honest.
Yeah, because you have to be.
Yeah.
You have to be.
I like to work with things that are difficult or fun or both.
Yeah.
But in order to get anywhere in a difficult situation, have to be very straightforward.
Yes.
I've been thrown out of boardrooms, which was fine because they couldn't take my message. But if they had taken my message, they would have been in a better situation today.
Yeah. So
it's all about, I'm a very friendly person, but I can be honest in a friendly way.
Yeah.
And if you're not prepared to open up a discussion with frank and straightforward discussions, then I'm out.
Yeah. And so I have a final question, which I ask all of my guests, and that is, if you were a furniture, what would you be?
That's a good question. I think I usually want to stand next to the executives, giving good advice, a good place to sit down and think. So I guess I would be, if not a sofa, at least a good chair.
A comfortable chair. That's somewhere
a very to sit down and think and reflect.
Yeah.
There's too little reflection going on.
Yes. Thank you so much, Erik, for sharing all of this with us. Thank you so much. And we look forward to see what it is that you will come out with in terms of offerings as well. Thank you, Erik.
So do I. Thank you so much, Liselott.
Thank you.
Best of success with your activities.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Exploring Leaders, a podcast produced by Degoshen, with the ambition to inspire insightful leadership in the digital age. If you found this episode interesting, join the momentum to amplify the voices of trailblazing leaders by sharing it with others for inspiration. For any questions or recommendations on other inspiring leaders you like to listen to, contact us via our website, degoshen.com, or via social media as LinkedIn or Twitter.